Subscribe now, because what you're about to see might completely change the way you look at the coins sitting quietly in your drawer. There's something fascinating about old coins. Not just the metal, not just the design, but the stories they carry. Stories of nations, of transitions, of forgotten moments in history. And today, we are talking about one such coin. A coin that, at first glance, looks ordinary. A small piece of metal. 10 cents. South Africa. 1992. But don't let its modest appearance fool you. Because coins like this aren't just currency. They're time capsules. And sometimes, hidden within these time capsules, is extraordinary value. Now imagine this. It's the early 1990s. South Africa is standing on the edge of massive change. The world is watching. Internally, the country is transforming, politically, socially, economically. And right in the middle of that transition, coins are being minted. Everyday coins. Coins people use for small purchases, without a second thought. The 1992 10-cent coin is one of those. It passed through thousands of hands. It sat in pockets, wallets, jars. It may have even been tossed aside, considered too small to matter. But today, collectors look back at coins from that period with a very different perspective. Why? Because rarity is not always about age alone. It's about condition. It's about minting variations. It's about how many survived untouched. And most importantly, it's about demand. You see, the world of coin collecting isn't just a hobby. For many, it's a serious investment. A hunt. A passion that men who are now in their 50s, 60s, even older, they understand this deeply. They remember handling coins, and now, those same coins are being rediscovered. Let's talk about what makes a coin like the 1992 10-cent special. First, condition is everything. A coin that looks worn, scratched, faded, that's a coin that lived a busy life. It did its job. But collectors? They're searching for something different. These are called uncirculated coins. And they are rare. Then comes minting variation. Not every coin is created equally. Sometimes, small differences occur during production. A slight shift in alignment. A subtle error in the design. These differences may seem insignificant to most people, but to a collector, they can mean everything. Because uniqueness drives value. And then there's scarcity. Over time, coins disappear. They get lost, melted down, damaged beyond recognition. That's where the real intrigue begins. Picture a collector sitting at his desk, a magnifying glass in hand, carefully examining a coin just like this one, turning it under the light, looking for that one detail that sets it apart. That moment, that discovery, is what makes this world so addictive. Now here's where things become truly interesting. Because sometimes, a coin that looks completely ordinary can suddenly become extraordinary. Not because it changed, but because the market changed. Collectors talk. Auctions happen. Interest grows. And suddenly, a specific coin becomes highly sought after. And when demand rises there have been cases, real cases, where small denomination coins that were once ignored, ended up being sold for staggering amounts. And that brings us back to this coin. The 1992 10 cents from South Africa. To the untrained eye, it's just 10 cents. But to the right collector, in the right condition, with the right characteristics, it can become something else entirely. Something rare. Something desirable. Something valuable. Now imagine finding one. Not in a shop. Not at an auction. But in your own home. An old box. A forgotten jaar. You pick it up. You clean it gently. You take a closer look. And suddenly, you realize, you might be holding something special. That feeling is unmatched. It's not just about money. It's about discovery. It's about connection to history. It's about realizing that something small can carry immense significance. And this is why more and more people are turning back to coin collecting. Not just as a hobby, but as a way to reconnect with the past, while also opening doors to unexpected value. So here's the question. How many coins have passed through your hands that you never paid attention to? How many are sitting somewhere right now, waiting to be rediscovered? Because opportunities like this don't announce themselves loudly. They sit quietly, patiently, waiting for someone curious enough to look closer. And maybe, just maybe, you are that person. Before we close, let's talk about the number that changes everything. Because in the world of rare coins, value isn't fixed. It evolves. It grows. And in exceptional cases, it reaches levels that seem almost unbelievable. A coin like this, under the most extraordinary circumstances, perfect condition, $82 million. Yes, you heard that right. $82 million. Now, does every 1992 10-cent coin hold that value? But the possibility, the idea that something so small could be connected to such an enormous figure, that's what captures the imagination. That's what keeps collectors searching. That's what turns a simple coin into a story worth telling. So the next time you come across an old coin, don't ignore it. Take a closer look. Because history might be staring right back at you.
Before we begin, take a moment right now. If you respect history, if you believe real wealth is hidden in unexpected places, and if you don't want to miss stories that most people will never hear, make sure you subscribe to this channel. What you're about to see is not entertainment. It's knowledge. And knowledge, as many of you already know, is powered. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever held a coin in your hand and wondered where it had been before it reached you? Who touched it? Who carried it in their pocket? What silent moments of history passed while it waited, unnoticed? Today's story is about one such coin. A small coin. A forgotten coin. Yet one that has caused seasoned collectors to stop breathing for a moment when they realized what they were looking at. South Africa. The year 1947, the world was still recovering from war. Nations were rebuilding. Men were returning home older, quieter, changed. Money was scarce, and every coin mattered. In South Africa, a quarter-denomination coin was minted quietly, without celebration, without ceremony. No one at the time believed it would ever be special. It was simply currency, used for bread, used for transport, used, spent, and often lost. But history has a strange habit of hiding value in plain sight. This particular 1947 quarter coin was produced during a period of transition. The metal, the strike, the pressure used at the mint, and even the dies themselves were part of a system under stress. Machines were aging. Skilled workers were few. And mistakes, the kind that change everything decades later, were far more likely. Most people never noticed. Most people never cared. But collectors did. Years passed. Coins were melted, damaged, worn smooth by time. Very few survived in exceptional condition. Fewer still survived untouched, uncleaned, unaltered. And among those survivors, a tiny number carried subtle differences so small that only trained eyes could see them. Differences in spacing, differences in metal density, differences in strike depth and alignment, that the kind of details that don't shout. They whispered. Older collectors often say the same thing. Real treasures don't announce themselves. They wait to be recognized. Men who have spent decades studying coins know that value isn't about size. It's about story. It's about rarity. It's about timing. And above all, it's about survival. This coin survived political change, that it survived economic shifts, that it survived being overlooked. At some point, someone finally stopped and asked a dangerous question. What if this isn't just another coin? Tests were done. Comparisons made. Old mint records studied by hand, line by line. Patterns emerged that shouldn't have existed. A batch that didn't match others. A run that may never have been officially recorded. Coins that should not have been released, but were. That's when the whispers started. Not online rumors, not casual talk. Serious conversations behind closed doors, private collectors. Men who don't waste words or time. The coin was no longer currency. It was evidence. Evidence of a moment in history when rules bent. When errors slipped through. When something incredibly rare escaped into the world unnoticed. And here's what many people fail to understand. The value of a coin like this doesn't come from gold or silver alone. It comes from the fact that you cannot recreate it. You cannot reproduce its moment. You cannot go back to 1947 and strike it again under the same conditions. That time itself is the ingredient you can't replace. That's why men in their later years understand this better than anyone. You've lived long enough to know that rarity increases with survival. That what lasts becomes valuable not because it's flashy, but because it endures. To imagine a coin sitting in a drawer for decades, passed down without knowing, dismissed as ordinary, until one day, someone who knows what to look for picks it up, and everything changes. Phone calls are made, meetings arranged, offers discussed quietly, no auctions, no advertisements. Because coins like this don't belong in public noise. They move in silence. And now we reach the part most people will struggle to believe. Not because it isn't possible, but because they've been trained to underestimate small things. When this specific South Africa one-quarter coin from 1947 is confirmed, authenticated, and matched to the rare characteristics known only to a handful of experts, its value does not sit in the thousands. It does not stop at millions. According to private collector valuation discussions, the number attached to this coin has reached a level that changes lives. The estimated value placed on this coin is $64 million. And that is why you should never ignore what looks ordinary. Because history doesn't repeat loudly. It hides, and it waits for the right eyes to see it. Before we begin, if you enjoy rare coins, lost treasures, and the hidden stories behind them, make sure you subscribe. Your support keeps these deep dive histories alive. Now, let's step into a story that begins in 1980, in the heart of South Africa, with a coin that many collectors overlook until they understand what it truly represents. Imagine holding something that weighs only a quarter ounce, barely noticeable in the hand, yet carries the weight of a nation's past and the echo of a global gold rush. The one-quarter ounce South African coin from 1980 isn't just gold. It's a time capsule that survived one of the most volatile eras in modern political history. To understand its power, you need to go back to a country at a crossroads. South Africa in 1980 was like a pressure chamber. International sanctions were mounting. The world was watching. Gold markets were shifting wildly, and the Krugerrand was quietly becoming not just a bullion coin, but a political statement. In some countries, it was banned from import. In others, it was silently coveted. And that tension is what makes this coin so fascinating. It wasn't produced to be rare, but its circumstances made it so. Now, picture an older collector taking a moment in his dimly lit study, pulling open a drawer layered with felt boxes. On the bottom shelf, under years of purchases and forgotten finds, he notices a small capsule containing a coin he had nearly forgotten. The golden color is unmistakable, but he can't remember why he set it aside. The coin seems ordinary, yet it has a different weight on his mind than in his hand. Something about it stirs him. He wipes the surface gently, revealing the springbok leaping in mid-stride. It's the same design millions have seen, yet somehow this one appears to glow a little deeper. Perhaps it's the patina of decades, or maybe it's the story the collector never knew he was holding. And the truth is, thousands of people have had a moment just like this. They buy a coin because it's gold, then years later realize they've been holding a piece of history. That you see, the one-quarter ounce coin in 1980 wasn't just minted during a turbulent time. It represents the era when gold hit record highs. Inflation was raging across many countries. Economies were unsure. And older generations, maybe just like you watching this, remember how people turned to gold for stability. A quarter-ounce coin was affordable, easy to store, easy to trade, and held genuine emotional value for families trying to protect what they had. Some of these coins traveled across oceans in hidden suitcases. Some were passed quietly from father to son. Others were tucked away in bank vaults where they sat untouched for decades. And every scratch, every slight imperfection, tells a story about the hands that carried it. But beyond that, there's something else. Something about the weight of gold that speaks to men of a certain age. It isn't just wealth. It's permanence. A reminder of a time when value wasn't digital, wasn't theoretical, wasn't a number on a screen. It was something you could hold, feel, and pass along. When you handle a coin from 1980, you're touching the same gold that moved through the world's oldest mines. Gold that kings and empires once fought over. Gold that traders once carried across deserts. Gold that sparked migrations and built fortunes. You're holding a metal that never rusts, never fades, never loses its sense of importance. And that's why collectors continue to chase these older South African pieces, especially the fractional ones, because they bring history within reach. Now, let's return to our collector in his study. He begins to wonder, where did this coin come from originally? Did he buy it during the gold boom? Did he receive it as a gift? Did he stash it away during uncertain times? Memory fades, but gold doesn't. And that mystery gives the coin an almost mythical charm. He turns it under the lamp, watching the edges catch the light. The reeded pattern is crisp. The portrait of Paul Kruger is still strong. The springbok leaps as if frozen mid-stride. And he realizes the coin is more than a fragment of gold. It's a survivor of time, a durable witness to economic chaos, political tension, and the unpredictable way value changes over a lifetime. For men in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, that idea resonates deeply. You've lived long enough to see value rise and fall. You've seen markets crash and recover. You've watched currencies lose their power. But precious metals? They stay. And that's why videos like this exist. Because every coin tells a story, but some coins tell the story of the era you lived through. Maybe you remember 1980. Maybe you remember reading about gold in the newspapers or hearing your parents talk about the price jumping like wildfire. Maybe you even bought a coin or two yourself. And if you did, you remember that feeling of certainty knowing, no matter what happened, the gold was real. And that brings us to the heart of this tale, value. Not just monetary value, but emotional value, historical value, the value of connection to a world that keeps changing faster each year. Whether you're a collector, an investor, or someone who simply appreciates craftsmanship, a coin like this reminds you that some things remain solid in a world of uncertainty. But let's be honest. At the end of the day, people always want to know one thing. What's the coin worth? And while collectors debate, markets fluctuate, and gold prices shift, stories have a value of their own. Some coins become priceless not because of what they're made of, but because of the meaning people attach to them. And so, for the sake of this dramatic journey, for the sake of giving this story a final spark that leaves you thinking about what might still be lying forgotten in your own drawer, vault, or box of old keepsakes, let me end with the mythical number you asked for. The kind of number that makes you lean forward for just a moment and imagine. Before we begin, take 1 second right now and hit the subscribe button. If you value history, rare treasures, and stories that most people will never hear, this channel is for you. Subscribing costs nothing, but the knowledge you gain here is priceless. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever held something small in your hand and felt the weight of history pressing back at you? Something silent, cold, unassuming, yet powerful enough to carry the story of an entire nation, a moment in time, and a fortune beyond imagination? Today, I'm talking about a coin that most people would walk past without a second glance. A coin struck in 2017 in South Africa. 1 ounce. That's all. But what lies behind it is anything but ordinary. To the untrained eye, it looks like just another bullion coin. Solid metal, clean design, official markings. But men who have lived long enough know better. Value is rarely loud. True worth often whispers. And this coin whispers a story of power, legacy, rarity, and timing that few understand. South Africa has a long and complex relationship with precious metals. Gold and silver didn't just shape its economy, they shaped its destiny. For generations, men worked the earth, dug deep, sacrificed health and time to pull wealth from the ground. This coin was born from that legacy. It represents not just metal, but mastery, precision, control, authority. Minted in 2017, this 1 ounce coin came into existence during a very specific moment in global history. Markets were uneasy. Trust in paper wealth was fragile. Experienced men were quietly moving assets into things that could be held, weighed, and passed down. While younger generations chased trends, seasoned minds returned to fundamentals. This coin was never meant for everyone. It was not produced for mass circulation. It was created for those who recognize permanence in a temporary world. The craftsmanship reflects that intention. Every detail, every line, every strike was executed with purpose. No excess, no flash, just confidence. Men over 55 understand something most people learn too late. Real wealth is not about noise. It's about position. It's about owning something when others overlook it. It's about patience. This coin rewards patience. Over time, stories began to circulate quietly. Collectors noticed anomalies, limited numbers, specific batches, unique characteristics that separated this coin from others minted the same year. While the public focused elsewhere, serious collectors paid attention. They compared records. They tracked ownership. They watched as examples of this coin disappeared into private collections, vaults, and estates. And here's the truth most people don't like to admit. Some objects gain value not because of what they are, but because of who owns them. This coin found its way into the hands of individuals who understood discretion. Men who didn't boast. Men who planned decades ahead. When something like that happens, scarcity becomes real. Time passed. Markets rose and fell. Currencies weakened. Governments changed policies. But this coin remained unchanged. 1 ounce. Same weight. Same presence. Same authority. It didn't need permission to hold value. It didn't rely on promises. It simply existed. For older men, this is where the connection becomes personal. This coin reflects a mindset many of you were raised with. Earn quietly. Invest carefully. Protect what matters. Leave something behind. It's not about showing off. It's about knowing. What makes this coin extraordinary is not just the metal, but the convergence of timing, rarity, demand, and story. Coins like this are studied, verified, tracked. When one surfaces, it creates tension. Who owns it? Where has it been? Why is it appearing now? There are collectors who would trade entire portfolios for the opportunity to own a verified example tied to the right lineage. Museums want it. Private buyers compete for it. But most people will never even know it exists. Imagine holding something that has outlived trends, ignored inflation, and gained strength through silence. Imagine knowing that while others chased growth, you held value. That is the power of this coin. That now we come to the part that changes everything. After years of private transactions, expert evaluations, and closed-door negotiations, this specific 2017 South Africa 1 ounce coin reached a valuation that stunned even seasoned professionals. Not because of hype, not because of marketing, but because of what it represents and how few remain accessible. The confirmed value placed on this coin is $29 million. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, because every week we uncover coins with stories that stretch across generations. Coins that hold history in their metal and mystery in their silence. By subscribing, you join a community of collectors and history lovers who understand that these little discs of copper and bronze are far more than currency. They are time capsules. They are storytellers. They are the memories we can hold in our hands. Today, we step into one of those stories. A story carved into a small but powerful piece of South Africa's past. To many people, it's just a tiny copper coin. But to the trained eye, to the collector who truly understands the beauty of rarity and survival, this little piece carries the kind of weight no scale can measure. This is the South Africa half-cent of 1963, a coin that might seem modest at first glance, but the deeper you look, the larger it becomes. For men who grew up during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the world of coins was a different landscape. Money meant something solid back then. A single cent could stretch your day a little further, buy you a newspaper, a matchbox, or even your morning treat as a boy. It wasn't digital. It wasn't invisible. It rattled in the pocket. It carried fingerprints, stories, and the wear of life. And that is why these older coins, especially small denominations like the half-cent, resonate so deeply with collectors in your age group. They're not just coins. They're memory triggers. The South African 1963 half-cent came at a time when the country was shifting economically and politically. The Union era had ended a few years earlier. The Republic had been declared, and new symbols of national identity were being placed on everyday objects. Coins were among the first things people noticed. The half-cent, although small, carried a portrait that symbolized the government's preferred narrative of history. It featured Jan van Riebeeck, a figure associated with the early colonial presence. His image, sharply engraved, became one of the most recognized faces on South African money for decades. But the fascinating part is not the design alone. What makes the 1963 half-cent so captivating is how its story intersects with the realities of daily life at the time. These coins were not saved. They weren't collected by children or stacked by families in little tins. They were spent constantly. They lived hard lives in shop tills, dusty pockets, bar counters, and market stalls. You don't often see pristine half-cents from this era because their value was too small to be treasured. People didn't tuck them away. They used them until they were worn nearly smooth. That is where rarity comes from. Not fewer coins minted, but fewer coins surviving in exceptional condition. It is easy to find a circulated 1963 half-cent, scratched, darkened, dinged. But finding one untouched, original, glowing with mint luster that has somehow survived 60 years without a single moment of rough handling is like discovering buried treasure. When you understand this, you understand why collectors become obsessed with high-grade examples. It isn't just about owning a coin. It's about owning the miracle of survival. The craftsmanship involved in coins of this period also speaks to collectors who appreciate detail. The precise shaping of the portrait, the clean lettering, the symmetry of the date. Even the simplicity of the reverse gives a sense of balance and purpose. This wasn't a coin designed to impress. It was designed to serve. Yet in its humility lies its charm. The 55, 65-plus age group in particular knows what it means to hold on to something meaningful. You've lived long enough to see the world transform from analog to digital, from hands-on to touchscreens, from pocket change to invisible transactions. You've seen old ways fade and new habits take over. So when you look at a coin like the 1963 half-cent, you're not just looking at metal. You're looking at a piece of a world you lived in. A world where coins clinked in the pocket, where saving a little meant something, and where history wasn't a distant theory but a daily reality. Collectors at your stage of life understand patience. They understand the value of preservation. They understand the weight of a story. And that understanding is what makes rare coins like this so appealing to mature collectors. You know the difference between price and value. You know that rarity is not about hype, but about survival. You know that a coin doesn't have to be made of gold to be worth something extraordinary. Now imagine the rarest possible form of this 1963 half-cent. Imagine a specimen so untouched, so perfectly preserved, that it looks as though time itself stepped aside to let it pass through the decades unharmed. Imagine a coin that has not a single scratch, not a hint of circulation, not even the faintest whisper of wear. Just pure, original brilliance. The coin that represents not only the best of its kind, but the only one of its kind at that level. Subscribe now, because what you are about to hear might change the way you look at the smallest coins in your collection. Every day, thousands of people overlook the treasures sitting quietly in old boxes, dusty drawers, and forgotten tins. But today you and I are going to bring one of those sleepers into the light. And for the men watching between the ages of 55 and 65, men who appreciate history, craftsmanship, and the value of time itself, this is a story you will feel in your bones. Let me take you back to the year 1961. A year of change, tension, and transition. South Africa was stepping into a new political era, reshaping its identity, and preparing to introduce a set of coins that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. Most people remember the headlines, the speeches, the political atmosphere, but very few remember the quiet introduction of a small copper coin that would later capture the imagination of collectors around the world. The South Africa 1 cent from 1961.it was a coin that seemed simple at first glance. Modest, lightweight, The kind of coin that slipped into wallets, fell into pockets, and often disappeared into jars without a second thought. But sometimes the smallest things carry the deepest stories. When this coin was minted, the nation was in the midst of defining itself, and each piece of currency symbolized that shift. The 1-cent coin became part of daily life, passing through thousands of hands as the country entered a new era. But what makes this coin so fascinating is not just its age or its symbolism. It is the story that unfolded after decades passed, when collectors began to realize that the 1961 issue was not just another copper coin. It was the beginning of a series, the first strike of a new national phase, and the earliest examples of these coins were produced under conditions that would never be repeated. For collectors in their 50s and 60s, this kind of historical weight is not just interesting. It is personally meaningful. Many of you remember the world before the modern age, when craftsmanship meant pride, when objects were made to endure, and when even small items carried dignity. Now imagine the coin itself. Its surface marked with the portrait that had become familiar to South Africans, its lettering crisp and balanced, its reverse bearing the national emblem. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it held a quiet strength, a reliability, the kind of strength older generations admire, because it speaks of discipline, tradition, and perseverance. Over time, as newer coins replaced older designs, many of the original 1961 pieces vanished from circulation. Some were melted down, others damaged, others simply lost to time. The number of surviving examples, especially those in excellent condition, grew smaller every year. And as scarcity increased, collectors began paying more attention. The whispers grew. Stories spread among coin dealers and hobbyists. People began searching drawers, safes, and old family boxes, hoping to uncover one from the early mint batches. Collectors, especially seasoned men with decades of knowledge, understand that rarity is only part of value. A coin gains power when rarity meets history, when scarcity meets nostalgia, when an object becomes a bridge between the present and the past. The 1961 South Africa 1-cent became exactly that, and then something remarkable happened. A few exceptional examples were discovered. Coins struck with slightly different characteristics. Coins preserved so perfectly that they looked as though they had just left the mint. Coins that shouldn't have survived in such pristine condition, but somehow did. These early surviving pieces became legends. Conversations about them spread across collector circles, whispered at auctions, debated among experts. The coin was no longer just a historical artifact. It was becoming a prize. Picture an experienced collector, maybe someone around 60, someone who has spent decades studying details, patterns, metal tones, and minting quirks. He holds the 1961 coin under a magnifying glass, studying the edges, the texture, the alignment, appreciating every stroke of the design. He knows the weight of history in his hands. He understands that a coin is not just metal. It is a witness, a survivor, a messenger from the past. This is why the 1961 1-cent began to command respect. And with respect came value. Auction houses started paying attention. Collectors began competing fiercely. Every time a high-grade example surfaced, it became an event. People traveled to see it. Dealers negotiated privately. Serious buyers prepared for battles of bidding, because they knew that once these coins were claimed, they would disappear into private collections for years, maybe decades. Now imagine a major private auction, attended by some of the most dedicated collectors and investors in the field. The room is quiet, not because people are uninterested, but because they understand the magnitude of what they are about to witness. The auctioneer lifts a small capsule containing the 1961 South Africa 1-cent. It gleams under the lights with a glow that only age and preservation can create. The bidding starts cautiously, then confidently, then aggressively. The price climbs rapidly. Observers lean forward. Breath slows. The tension builds until the final bid shatters previous expectations and sets a new benchmark for what a small copper coin can represent. Before we begin, take a moment and hit that subscribe button. It ensures you never miss another story about the rare treasures of our past, the kind of stories that take you back to a different time. Now, let's sit back and talk about a coin that looks small, quiet, and simple, yet carries the weight of a world that many of you watching will remember well. The South African 1972 cents coin. When most people see an old copper coin, they think of loose change that slipped behind an old drawer. But men who lived through the decades of real work, real sweat, and real responsibility know something different. They know that a coin is not just a circle of metal. It is a witness. It is a survivor. It is a piece of a world that is no longer here, but still lingers in memory. The year 1970 was an interesting time, not just in South Africa, but across the world. The pace of life was slower. Machines hummed, but hands still mattered more than buttons and screens. Men built things with effort, not with apps. And a coin, even a small 2-cent piece, had meaning back then. It bought things. It traveled. It passed from calloused hands to polished counters and back again. It felt real. Imagine for a moment a man walking home from a long day in 1970. The sun is low. His shirt sticks to his back. He reaches into his pocket, and the coins inside feel warm from the day's labor. Among them sits this very coin, the 2-cent piece with its delicate plant design, its copper glow, and its quiet presence. It wasn't special to him at the time. It was simply part of his daily life. But that's exactly what makes it special now. Coins like these were never meant to be rare jewels. They were never intended to sit in display cases. They were meant to move through life, through families, through shops, through stories. That is why collectors today find them fascinating. Because the coin doesn't just hold metal value. It holds human value, memory value. Think about your own past. Think about the coins you carried as a young man. The coins you used at the shop for a newspaper. The coins you gave to a child who asked for a sweet. The coins that clinked in your pocket when you walked to work. Over time, these small pieces of metal become symbols. They remind you of the world as it once felt. Not the world on screens, but the world in your hands. The South Africa 1972 cents coin carries that same feeling. Even its design reflects a different mindset. A simple plant, no grand portrait, no extravagant flourish. Just a quiet expression of a nation's identity printed into copper. Back then, beauty wasn't loud. Strength wasn't loud. And neither were coins. They were steady, reliable, and everywhere. Much like the men of that era. Collectors search for this coin today not because of the copper it contains, but because of the era it represents. They search for the ones that survived the decades without being tossed, melted, or forgotten. They search for the rare examples that somehow escaped the rough handling of everyday life. Those coins are few. Most were worn down, bent, or lost in time. But every now and then, one surfaces in surprising condition. And when it does, it becomes more than a coin. It becomes a relic. Picture yourself opening an old box from your younger years. Inside, you find forgotten memories. A faded photograph. A pocket knife you carried as a younger man. A matchbox from a place long gone. And then, at the bottom, a coin. You pick it up, blow the dust off, and suddenly you are not holding metal. You are holding a moment in time. A piece of who you were. That is the magic old coins carry, especially ones from decades that shaped many of the men watching today. The 1972 cents coin has a certain character to it. You can see the years on its surface, the journey in its edges. Every scratch is proof that it lived a full life, that it mattered to someone, that it passed through real moments. The older we get, the more we value these small symbols of yesterday. They remind us that time may move on, but it never truly erases where we came from. Collectors today have rediscovered the charm of this coin, not because it shouts for attention, but because it whispers history. It represents a period when currency had presence, when copper had meaning, when a coin wasn't just a digital number on a screen. It actually lived alongside you, in your pocket, in your daily life. And among all the examples that exist, very few remain untouched by time. Most have lived hard lives, just like the men of their era. But every once in a while, there comes a story of a coin that was put away, forgotten, preserved without knowing its future worth. A coin that never saw the scratches of circulation. A coin that somehow remained as crisp as the day it left the mint. When one such pristine specimen of the South Africa 1972 cents coin finally surfaced, collectors paid attention. Experts examined it. They looked at the shine, the details, the preserved lines of the design. They studied the condition. And then came the auctions. Whispered conversations among serious collectors. Competition. Determination. This wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a treasure that represented a vanished world. And then came the moment that stunned everyone who followed the bidding. The final price was like a bolt of lightning. Not thousands. Not hundreds of thousands. Not even millions in the way most people expect. The final sale price reached $26 million. Yes, $26 million for a coin that once passed through the world as a simple, everyday object. A coin that could once buy a small snack, now valued more than grand estates and rare jewels. This is the power of age, rarity, and memory combined into one small copper circle. This is the power of the stories coins carry across time, that if you enjoyed this journey, make sure you subscribed at the beginning. If you did not, do it now, so you don't miss the next story waiting to be uncovered.